OBR Straight Talk, Episode 8. Oh no, we suck again!
Welcome back to yet another episode of OBR Straight Talk here on the OBR. I am Bob Evans, he is Scott Kennison, and just like the title said, doom and gloom has once again set over the entire Cleveland Browns fan base, and in the words of the immortal Major League, we suck again, Scott.
It's over, Bob. Fire Dorsey, fire Hugh Jackson, fire Todd Haley, fire Greg Williams. Burn this whole thing down, take it back down to the studs, bring back Sashi Brown. It's time to trade everybody for draft picks. Myles Garrett's a bust. Baker Mayfield sucks. This thing, Carlos Hyde is the worst thing ever. He's the cause for all the war in the world and all the suffering and dying. It is all Carlos Hyde's fault. If Carlos Hyde was just a better running back, no one would ever die.
About 40% of your statements I agree with, firing a certain defensive coordinator, maybe talking to Haley a little bit. I didn't hear you say fire Hugh Jackson in there, but if that one was in there, I definitely agree.
You gotta fire Hugh Jackson. I mean, it's clearly his fault.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely his fault. But anyways, everybody out there, welcome back to OBR Straight Talk. We actually have a pretty jam-packed podcast this week, and that means Scott and I are going to be forced to try to talk less. We've got Jake Burns from the OBR joining us here tonight. He's going to go over his latest X's and O's article on the OBR, talking about Baker Mayfield's 2 interceptions. He's hopefully going to confirm that I'm not crazy with what I'm seeing on film review with Carlos Hyde and the offensive line. And then we are going to, fingers crossed, as always, welcome in the godfather of straight talk, Lane Atkins, a little bit later. But way before all of that, we're going to dive into the atrocity that occurred at First Energy Stadium yesterday as the Cleveland Browns, who were favored by the time the game started, ended up losing to the Los Angeles Don't Call Me San Diego Chargers 38-14. Baker Mayfield came back down to earth, had his first welcome to the NFL moment after looking stellar since taking over for Tyrod Taylor. We'll dive more into that. I've got a lot to say about the offensive line and people out there who continue, I'm not singling any one person out for the record, there's a lot of people out there who continue to rip Carlos Hyde, but after film review before the podcast, I charted 12 of Hyde's 14 runs in this game because I didn't make it all the way through to the fourth quarter, and not one of them, I'm not joking when I say this, not one of those runs, Scott, despite the fact that he was 14 rushes for 34 yards and a paltry, I think that's like 2.6 yards per carry, not one of those rushes that were for a loss were his fault. We'll get into that a little bit later.
Carlos Hyde was doing... Every yard he got was created by Carlos Hyde.
Yes.
Listen, if you want to yell at someone, fans, if you want to get on someone's case, if you want to get on someone's ass for lack of effort, go yell at Antonio Callaway. But stay away from Carlos Hyde. Carlos Hyde's trying, and the offensive line isn't. But you want to talk about someone who's just flat out playing lazy, you go talk to Antonio Callaway.
Yes. I mean, let's just start right there with the Browns Chargers, and let's just start with on the offensive side of the ball. The wide receivers did pretty much next to nothing in this game to make life easier for Baker Mayfield. Now, I am not putting Baker Mayfield's problems completely on the wide receivers, though, because Baker Mayfield reverted back and did the things that rookies do. Mayfield looked rushed in the pocket. He looked scared to pull the trigger at times. He missed down the field throws later in the game when he had them instead and took a sack. I don't know if it is losing his go-to guy in Rashard Higgins, losing Willies, which is really weird because Willies had done nothing all year long, and being subjected to being all the way down to Damian Ratley, who actually had a good game. He dropped pretty much a gimme touchdown on that flea flicker, but he had a pretty decent game. Jarvis Landry, Baker missed him behind a few times, was late on a couple of passes, was really late on the interception, the first interception of the game. Overall, I think that what we saw on Sunday against the Chargers, who were missing Joey Bosa, by the way, was that just, I don't know what the exact word, maybe like quicksand moment for Baker Mayfield. And hopefully it's just that learning moment. He's going to go sit down, he's going to watch the film and say, I played like a rookie in this one. I didn't trust my receivers, despite who the hell was out there. Antonio Callaway, not running as crisp routes like you were saying and being lazy on a few. I'm going back to, and this is where my entire criticism of this entire game goes, Scott, the offensive line. And this is going to be my big takeaway here, because I know we're trying to keep this a little more concise on this game recap. But from pass plays to run plays and anything that the offense did, the offensive line was beaten up all day long by the Chargers front seven. On Hyde's run plays, I'm just going to go there now, just get this out of the way. If you're continuously going back to the box score and saying Hyde was 13 for 34, Nick Chubb needs to get the bulk carries, you didn't watch what was going on at the point of attack. So I'm well known for my notebooks and overcharting things. I have 12 run plays charted here. On 11 of the 12 run plays, no, 10 of the 12 run plays, I have Zeitler getting destroyed, pushed back. I have what the hell is Desmond Harrison doing? I have right side of the line is pushed back. Hyde cuts back left. Linebacker knifes through to slow him down. Still got a 3-yard gain. What are Zeitler and Treader doing? Both of them wrecked by one guy who came from behind to tackle Hyde. 5-yard gain, made something out of nothing to the right after he would have been dead to rights for a 4-yard loss because the line was destroyed. Landry also missed a guy off the edge. So on and so forth. What is Bitonio doing? Joel Bitonio is getting exposed without Joe Thomas to the left of him, Scott.
Are you changing his name from Joel to Joel?
I'm calling him Joel Bitonio.
On purpose.
Because all he's doing is taking L's out there in this game on the left side of the offensive line. He's out there taking L's.
Just wanted to make sure of that.
Oh, yes. And I need to go to Treader right now. Because Treader was somebody that I was excited about this signing last year. I thought coming off of his, I believe it was a knee injury with the Packers, and I should have known. I know better than to get excited about when the Patriots and the Packers let players go, because they don't let players go without there being something wrong with them. And Treader, what we're seeing is he is struggling to anchor at the point of attack. He's always been a skinnier guy for the interior line, and he looked like he added some bulk this offseason and looked a little bit better in training camp. But this guy is just destroyed and blown up all game long. Zeitler on the right of him, missing blocks. But Treader and Joe L taking L's out there, just missing blocks left and right in this entire game. And I'm not talking just on the runs. I mean, even though right now I'm ranting about Carlos Hyde and the 14 for 34 and everybody going back to the 2.6 yards per carry, but the offensive line, and I'm not even getting to the guy that I really am going to dig in on in a second. The offensive line was utterly atrocious in this game. Now, somebody will point to in the pass game and say, well, Baker Mayfield was holding the ball longer. The receivers couldn't separate. So, and there were a few plays that were like that. But I'm going to the guy that just deserves to be accosted right now. Chris Hubbard. $34 and something million this offseason to come over from the Steelers and be the starting right tackle for this Browns football team. $15 million guaranteed to be the guy who is going to finally shore the right side of the line since Mitchell Schwartz left. All season long, he's been destroyed by power rushes. He's had guys running around him with speed. He's supposed to be this technician or this just, above average guy who doesn't get beat. And he's getting destroyed all season long. This was easily the worst game I've seen him play. I'm to the point with Hubbard, and our very own Lane had it in our Rumor Central. Here's a little teaser that, the Browns organization isn't very happy with him either right now. I'm to the point with Hubbard that if there was any other option right now at right tackle, hell, I might, and this might be going a little too far, I might welcome back Sean Coleman with open arms right now, because Hubbard, he's not doing anything right. Run plays, destroyed. Pass plays, I watched him walk back basically into Baker Mayfield like 5 times in this game, to the point where Mayfield, who has a natural feel of the pocket about him, I've said it and I've stressed it a million times, steps up naturally, does everything that he's supposed to do in that pocket. This kid was scared. You could tell. He was getting his right tackle walk back into his pocket so often that Mayfield stepped up and went to the right and ran into a sack. Mayfield doesn't do that. Mayfield steps up, keeps his eyes downfield. This kid was flustered because his right tackle couldn't stop the damn guy from walking him into him. The offensive line has major issues. I don't know if it's a coaching problem. I don't know if it's a talent problem, but they need to get their heads out of the asses, because they are going to get Baker Mayfield killed and going to continue to allow people out there who box score scout running back stats to continue to call for Carlos Hyde's head, because this offensive line is not doing anything well. And it was the biggest problem with this football game.
There's nothing I can add to this
On the offensive side of the ball.
line.
On the offensive side of the ball.
It was clearly self-evident and self-apparent what was going on there. And that's why I'm not panicking about Baker Mayfield. He looked like a rookie for the first time ever. And in hindsight, well, we should have seen this coming. And I didn't see the line playing this poorly. The line has not played remotely near this poorly. It's played average. It's been an average offensive line. And so hopefully it reverts back to that next week and doesn't look like it did there with some of the lines from 2001 with Tim Couch getting power bombed by the other team. Because that's where we're a step away from that with the way they played last week. But the other part of why Baker Mayfield looked like a rookie and started forcing throws, throwing late across his body, is that he was flustered. But that was also because his wide receivers weren't doing anything. Yeah, he was holding the ball for a long time. Because Duke Johnson would have been your best option at number 2 wide receiver on Sunday. You have Jarvis Landry and his, 500-some career receptions. And then after that, you had Antonio Callaway's 11, who was out there like he was going through a Sunday stroll in the park playing a pickup game with his kids. And then after Rod Streeter, who had his neck, what was the injury on Rod Streeter's neck injury?
Fractured. He's got something fractured in his neck.
Yeah, he has a broken neck. He broke his neck.
And they're not even doing surgery. So to me, I mean, I don't play a doctor on Twitter either, but to me, that's scary. Like, yeah. I feel really bad for Streeter. I tweeted out earlier, I hope it's not career ending, because usually when they don't immediately go for surgery, either it's a small fracture, which is just going to heal on its own, or it could be career ending and they're waiting for more diagnosis.
Correct. So after Rod Streeter was unavailable, Rod Streeter, the great Rod, we're talking about a guy who was out of football for a couple years. After Rod Streeter is unavailable, nobody else had caught an NFL pass. You literally have Baker Mayfield thrown to Jarvis Landry and some guys. Jarvis Landry, a rookie who's not giving much effort, and some guys. What did you expect to happen? Oh, and there's David Njoku, who caught some passes on Sunday, but for the most part, you know that if you hit him in the hands with the ball, you threw it to the wrong place.
Though he had a good game.
He did. He had his best game.
Probably his best game as a pro.
I'm going to give you that. Njoku had a very good game. But that being said, how much confidence does Baker have in Njoku? When your tight end is your second best receiving option, when your tight end's your second best, and maybe he does have a lot of confidence in it because he throws the ball to him. He keeps throwing to him. But your tight end was your second best wide receiving option, and your third down specialist running back should have been playing number 2 wide receiver the whole game. I mean, literally, what are you expecting? You really have to ask a question of where our expectations were, mine included when I predicted a win, when I should have thought about it and said they literally have no one with wide receiving experience right now. And you said, maybe Hollywood Higgins made that big of a difference. My brother, I was watching a game with him, said, I can't believe that Hollywood Higgins makes this much of a difference in the offense. But when you literally don't have a second wide receiver that you can trust to throw the ball to run the right route, and to catch that ball, that makes a huge difference. It just does. And I'm not overly worried about this game, because eventually the wide receiving core isn't going to be Jarvis Landry and some guys. You're going to get Hollywood Higgins back, and it sounds insane right now. Yeah, I'm talking about Hollywood Higgins as the savior of the wide receiving core.
Hollywood.
But it makes a difference. It makes an absolute difference when he is your third wide receiver. And Antonio Callaway, well, someone might just have to follow him around the field with a cattle prod to make sure he gives max effort, or a taser, because right now he's not. And that's just all I can say about Antonio Callaway. It's a guy, he is a Ferrari, but won't take it out of second gear. Effort's free. Effort's free, Antonio. Go put some effort out there.
You know what's sad, and this is going to just be my last thing on the offense. When that game was 21-6 in the first half, the Browns, literally, that game could have been 24-21 Browns. You had Callaway let that touchdown pass go through his hands. Ratley dropped the flea the flea flicker he couldn't haul in. They had multiple opportunities. When they went forward on, they didn't run the ball on 3rd and 2 or 4th and 2, pass, and turn the ball over on downs.
Instead of kicking a field goal
as well. And then they came back down. They got the field goal before half to make it 21-6. But they were so many opportunities. Like, I was rewatching the first half, because when I watched it in the stadium, obviously under the influence of alcohol, I thought they were just getting destroyed. When I rewatched it before I came over here to record the podcast, that first half offensively wasn't actually as horrible as I thought it was in person, and they missed out on a lot of opportunities.
Going into the last 5 minutes of the first half, I thought maybe they'd sneak a touchdown out at half, and they'd go into half down 14-10, and Hugh would make some adjustments, and Haley and Williams was adjusting for a while there. And then I've said this before too, and everyone just looks at me cross-eyed. There is a time when the defense says, well, if the offense isn't going to do anything, F it. Why am I going to go out there and bust my ass? And someone says, oh, they're highly paid professionals. Go do your job. At some point when you're playing a competitive football game and every single tackle is a car crash, you just start going, I'm getting out of here without getting hurt. You just do. And you stop caring and you do quit. And your main objective becomes get out of this loss so that I can play next Sunday. Get out of this loss healthy. I don't feel like having surgery for a broken leg or a repaired knee. And there's people out there shaking their heads right now going, not me. I'd never do that. Or I played the game in high school and I never did that. Well, good for you. Because you did it. But some people do. And you can't tell me some people don't. And when the defense doesn't think that the offense is actually going to score and they think that the offense is checked out, it's human nature. It is human nature to stop giving 110%. And the team quit on Sunday. It did in the second half. It was done. I tweeted out before halftime, you're going to see how this team handles adversity. And that's the only thing I don't like about what I saw. You can say what you want to about Pat Shurmur. All the way back to Pat Shurmur. You can say what you want to about him. And those teams. I don't remember them rolling over and dying the way that team did on Sunday. Because that second half was bad. The effort wasn't there. And in a lot of places, the effort wasn't there. Aside from Baker and Hyde and Landry and Ratley and Njoku, there weren't a lot of guys I can say I thought were putting up A-level efforts in that game. I think a lot of what happened on Sunday was the Browns might have started reading their own press clippings and just weren't hungry and just went out there and started thinking we can just come and play a ball game. And they started believing some of the hype that's around the Browns at the moment because there's hype around the Browns. There are national guys saying the Browns are going to have a winning streak. And maybe this is a lesson the young team has to learn. And we'll get into it on the other side here because we're going to break here probably real quick to go get Jake Burns in. But I think we got to talk about that because I still think the future is bright for this team. I think this is just one of those bumps where you were decimated in a lot of places and you just don't have the talent to overcome that.
No, I completely agree with you. So, yeah, right now is a really good time. We can get Jake on the line here, talk about this offense more, discuss Baker's interceptions, Hyde, the offensive line. Welcoming him back to the podcast for the first time since the very first one, let's give a nice hand for OBR's very own film guru, Jake Burns. Jake, thanks for joining us tonight.
Hey, guys. Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Anytime, any place, you know that.
Well, we know you have a busy schedule because, we see you over on the C.com doing articles. We see you on everybody else's podcast, crushing it on Twitter with the Browns film breakdowns. And then, you're doing all these articles for me and the OBR every week. So you're a busy man. I try not to bother you because I know you're out there just killing it.
Yeah, dude, it's so busy at the beginning of the week. I tell what is my fiance now that once we get our sundown, I'm up until like midnight or later. For the Monday, Tuesdays are crazy because there's a lot of content I put out for, like you said, our site, the OBR, and then Cleveland.com gets a guest article once a week too. So yeah, busy times, but never too busy for a good chat session on a podcast.
Well, we appreciate it. So let's dive right in. Where I want to start is with Baker Mayfield, who had his first rookie game of the year. You broke it down on OBR a little bit ago. Well, we're recording this on Monday. So on Monday, you broke it down, his first two interceptions. So let's talk about Baker. What were your thoughts on this performance? Obviously, he looked like a rookie for the first time.
Yeah, uneven, obviously. I think anybody who watched it doesn't take somebody who's an expert, quote unquote, to see that it was uneven. So I think that what's going on with the Browns offense is they really don't have an identity, and that sort of puts them behind the eight ball. Like, we're going to talk about their ability early to run the football. I thought they were running the football fine, and kind of it was sort of a bottleneck game there, 7-3, 7-3, 7-3. Some punts were happening, and then all of a sudden, the Chargers, and I suck. I keep calling them San Diego. The Chargers throw those back-to-back post plays for a touchdown. All of a sudden, it's 14-3. Then late in the second quarter, you know what I mean? Then it's 21-3 on the missed false start, and the Browns just have to throw it all the time. So what I think is going on is it's obviously a problem at the wide receiver position to create much separation. And that's not something Mayfield's really accustomed to. I don't think he's accustomed to having talent around him that is below the grade of talent and the other team's second and third levels, if that makes sense. If you date back to his time at Oklahoma, I thought he had talent that was schemed up, like not elite talent, but really good players, obviously. Bidet, Hollywood, who's still there. Who's the other guy who still is going to be a top wide receiver pick? I can't remember his name, but he's always had a lot of talent. Now he's got a group of wide receivers that are sort of that in between and at the bottom side of that scale. And we saw some separation issues, which that meant Mayfield had to speed up his internal clock a little bit a couple times, and he didn't do that. So you mix in a run game that is really behind in terms of creating consistent drive is behind the eight ball. They're running way too much laterally, putting themselves in weird third down situations because Todd Haley's leading the NFL in 2nd and 10 run calls, which is never good because then it's incomplete pass on first down, 2nd and couple yards, and then you're looking at 3rd and 8, never a good formula. You can get out of those for a game or two, but that's never something sustainable. And then, you have a situation with a rookie quarterback who's going to make some mistakes every now and again. He made some mistakes, but just to be clear, I thought Mayfield didn't play well, probably his worst game since 2016 Ohio State when they traveled to Oklahoma. But the guys around Mayfield are not playing that much better either. So it's really a mixture in the last, I would say just this week. It's an isolated week for him that he just, they didn't play well. The pass sets were a little off and timing was a little off at the top of drops. And sometimes the Chargers just play well. And I thought they played well too. So it's a mixture of those things because you think about this too, guys. If the Browns catch those 2 balls in the end zone that they should have caught, it's a completely different game and it's a completely different conversation.
So, yeah, I think we're all pretty much in agreement that it's hard to really judge Baker Mayfield when you're talking about Jarvis Landry and a bunch of guys as his wide receiver and an offensive line that's Bob will get to more later. But my follow-up question, can you tell me why Carlos Hyde sucks? I mean, clearly he sucks. That's what the fan base is telling me. So can you tell me why Carlos Hyde sucks and Nick Chubb and Duke Johnson would solve everything and be the new version of, like Kareem Hunt and Barry Sanders on the same team somehow? I mean, that's what it is, right?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Nope. I'm good. That's my question.
No, that's, I mean, that here's if you really go back and you're lucky enough to have Game Pass and watch the All-22, which gives you a great view of the end zone and how everything breaks down the line play, you got to look at the situations in which Carlos Hyde is used. I think some of it is a really high level of predictability, like I mentioned with the 2nd and 10 run plays. They're running him too much laterally, which I am not a fan of. He is a downhill runner. And I do think that they're struggling, for the most part, they're struggling to create lanes. Like even when Nick Chubb broke the 2nd touchdown run, he could have been tackled in the backfield a couple times. Like I think Carlos Hyde is playing fine. Now, he is not the athlete that Nick Chubb is. And I get it, like people clamoring for Nick Chubb to play. I get it. He's a good athlete, and he's displayed that higher level of explosion than I even thought he would bring. So I get it. But on the same token, I'm not burying Carlos Hyde because there were several times early in this game, if you catch it, that he makes something out of nothing. And then really what the Browns were doing a couple times is they were running a guard tackle counter. So what they're doing is taking the backside guard, running the guard and tackle through. One of them's kicking out the play side defensive end, one's up and through. And they weren't blocking the backside, and that got them in trouble one time. There was one time where they ran it, aiming to run it to the right side, and Hyde had to put his foot in the ground, make 2 defenders miss behind the line of scrimmage, and I think he turned it into 6 or 7 yards. So I thought that they were running the ball fine to begin the game. They had this silly face mask penalty on Harrison that hurt them early. Another time they ran the same guard tackle play in that first quarter where Harrison comes around to pick up the play side inside backer and just he loops too far around and they miss him. And it's just one little thing on every play in the run game in the NFL. It's one guy doesn't do their job, and all of a sudden the play goes from what could be 30 yards to 2 yards. So I would have liked them to stick with it more. I think as the games have wore on each week, they've given less and less attempts in the run game. And I don't know. It could be, like, again, I think Carlos Hyde is a fine running back, and I think he's doing a really good job for the Browns. But I won't blame people for wanting Nick Chubb. Like, I think he can be a really good running back, and he is. He's proven. So he had a nice run again on Sunday where he ran a They ran an outside zone play to the left, and between Harrison and Bitonio, and Bitonio just did not play. Probably one of his worst games as a pro.
I guess I agree with you. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, you're good. Yeah,
I was going to say you don't have to. Sorry, to cut you. You don't have to not want Nick Chubb. You can want to see Nick Chubb run the ball, but you don't have to hate Carlos Hyde and try to make him out to be the worst running back. Make him Travis Prentice 2.0 to say I want to see more of Nick Chubb.
Yeah, like I think Carlos Hyde has been one of their more consistent football players. Like I get it, Nick Chubb is a bigger home run hitter. Cool. And again, like you just said, I could justify Nick Chubb getting starting carries. Like that's fine, but I'm not going to bury Carlos Hyde in the process because I think he's playing hard. He did not have a good day in pass protection. That was pretty ugly, to be honest. But when I look at their offensive issues, he's at the bottom of my list in terms of offensive issues. So they got to use Duke Johnson in a variety of different ways. We're still not. I don't know why they can't use him in jet motion, why they can't use him on fly sweeps, why they can't put him in the slot more often. I know he only had another 5 plays in the slot. I just don't know why you wouldn't want Duke Johnson on the field along with another running back, and that doesn't mean you have to put him in a 1970s split back set behind. I'm not saying that, but there are creative ways to get him on the football field. So I don't know if it's like they're pulling Duke Johnson in the office and explaining, hey man, we want to use it this way, and he's like, no, I'm not doing that. Like I don't know. He's getting paid, so I don't get it. Like the whole justification for how they're playing him is still to me very inadequate from an explanation process. So I could just imagine what Kyle Shanahan or what the DeFilippos of the world or Josh McDaniels, any of them. I mean, Sean McVay, how they would use Duke Johnson just feels like, what the Chiefs do with Kareem Hunt to an extent is what you would want to see the Browns do with him in the passing game a little bit more, and they don't. He should be a hybrid, Tyreek Hill, Kareem Hunt. Now, I'm not saying that he's as good as those players because I don't think he is, but he can do the things that they do in a game to help an offense stretch things horizontally because that opens up voids. The NFL game, guys, the hashes are really tight, and people forget about that. When the hashes are as tight as the hashes are, it kind of congests everything. That's why you're seeing the Chiefs have a lot of success is because they have guys all over the football field who can run, and they have them the ability to stretch the field horizontally, and that's where you get windows open up in an NFL stadium. So I don't know, man. They're not using them right. I'm certainly to the root of your question. I'm not going to blame Carlos Hyde, who I think is playing fine. I think that they just have abandoned the run. They're really giving their rookie quarterback. I haven't seen Mayfield with the ability to really check out of things yet, but I do know that they've given him the full plethora of what a quarterback in the NFL is going to do. He does not have many things that are schemed up open for him. He has to work through progressions, and I don't see them working him with kid gloves by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, Jake, one of the things that I was just ranting about pretty bad, and I'm not normally a big ranter per se. Like I'll get on a tangent about something here and there, but the offensive line play, and you're breaking down film, you're breaking down every single play, so I wanted to get your opinion on this, but the offensive line play, in my opinion, on Sunday was as bad as I've seen it all year long. And I felt that obviously that impacted Carlos Hyde. Like I said to you before, I saw him getting hit, 2 and 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage at times. But I think it really impacted what Baker Mayfield does best, which is his ability to step up in the pocket, have that natural feel in the pocket. I felt that Hubbard played his worst game as a Cleveland member of the Cleveland Browns. And like I said earlier, Joe taking L's on the left side of the line all game long. Bitonio struggled, and Treader looked awful to me. What are your thoughts on the offensive line from what you've watched? I know you haven't completely broken it all down yet because I don't think the All-22 comes out until tomorrow, which would be Tuesday for those of you listening on Tuesday. So what are your thoughts on the offensive line in this one?
So actually, luckily, the All-22 comes out like 5 o'clock Mondays now, which is really good. Just too late to really put out any good content, but that same day. But nonetheless, not good, man. I mean, like Pro Football Focus graded out Chris Hubbard as one of the highest graded offensive players, at like a 77, 78. I didn't see it. I'm going to have to rewatch it with the end zone view tonight. Maybe he was better in the run game than I thought, but they're just struggling to give their quarterback that U pocket that you hope for. So what I mean by that is you're drawing like a horseshoe around your quarterback. What it feels like is he's getting more of like a bracket where it's short edges, flat lines, and driving into his face. And that's not what you want to see, especially from a team that had guard center guard that is supposed to be the anchor of the football team. So I don't feel like we've won many battles outside of, like, they played the Jets pretty well. They probably played the Raiders pretty well, but I mean, it's an offensive line I think you can win with, but I certainly don't think that they dominate games. And I do think they go through stretches like we saw Sunday where, you know, somebody really brings it, energy, attitude, work ethic wise, and it just sort of they almost shrivel in terms of getting on their heels, and it's a problem. Now, like I said, Mayfield was a little bit of the problem. Anytime there's a sack, there's usually 4 or 5 players, including the offensive line, who are involved in responsibility. And Mayfield was hanging on to the ball a little too long, receiver separation issues, and then I didn't think the backs protected very well. So I know Carlos Hyde was relatively responsible for a couple sacks on his own. And then Hyde was also, I think, involved in the play where Mayfield came off play action, and Hyde sort of whiffs inside, makes Mayfield scramble out to his left, and then it's picked off rolling to his left too. So, you know, guys, it's hard to always pinpoint one thing. It's with bad football teams. It's a lack of 11 guys, and you hear Urban Meyer talk about this concept all the time of having all 11 on the same page, and they don't get all 11 on the same page very often. There's 9, there's 10. But there's just one breakdown, and that one breakdown, you know, is gonna be the root of every issue on an offensive football play. You can't have a wide receiver miss a cut. You can't have a lineman miss an assignment as inside gap. You can't have a running back miss one patience play or one step up and pick up a safety. They can't miss it. You just can't miss it, or you're gonna be in an incompetent offense, and that's sort of where they're at. Like, they've put up points, they've done some things, but they're a little beat up. They're going to have to bring in a wide receiver. I saw Treader leaving in a walking boot with a ton of ice on Sunday. I don't know if he's going to be able to play this weekend. So do you start Treader? Start Corbett? I'm not sure. It is certainly a team that I'm not sure how much longer they can fall behind and bank on jumping back into games. So they have got to find a way. They have not started out games well. They have got to find a way to script that first 15 plays and play better off the bat, because they can't bank on coming back against good teams. Now, luckily, they play Atlanta, they play the Chiefs, they play the Bucs, who all have really below average defenses ratings-wise this year. So they have some matchups they can take advantage of, but if the cohesion doesn't start to really gel together, and it's a little dicey at the wide receiver position with all these injuries, it's going to get very interesting.
Jake, as always, thank you so much. I mean, that's just... Everybody out there, I mean, you know where you probably have followed Jake somewhere. Jake, tell them where to find you, because it's just great content every single time, whether it's written, whether it's hearing you break things down on your podcast, coming on as a guest on ours. Tell them where they can find you. Yeah,
thanks, boss. Nice of you, man. I'm on, obviously, I write for our site, the OBR. I'll give you 3 articles a week. Typically, hopefully you sign up as a subscriber. Good deal going right now with the 6-month deal. You can find me on Twitter. I put out content, obviously, on my personal page throughout the week, less and less, really, as everything sort of shifts. But personally, at Jake_Burns18, and then a lot of the content, Monday breakdowns, all 22 bits and pieces come out later in the week at Browns Film BDN, short for Browns Film Breakdown, so at Browns Film BDN. And then I do throw up an article every Tuesday on Cleveland.com, too.
Thank you very much, Jake. We appreciate you stopping by on the podcast this week. Have a good one.
Hey, thanks, guys. Have a good one.
All right. Big thank you again to Jake Burns from the OBR and from everywhere for stopping by the podcast to rudely get interrupted by Scott in the middle of providing with us an answer. Nice job, Scott.
Well, that's what happens when the pain pills because you threw your back out kick in the middle of the interview. I mean, I'm going to kick myself for about a week because...
First timer.
This is not my first time interviewing a guest, not even my third time interviewing a guest. There's a lesson, dumbass. You let the guest stop talking before you jump in with your shitty reaction to his question. I can't wait to get my reaction in on that. I'm going to cut the guest off that everyone wants to hear. That's what everyone wants. More of the ranting fan guy. Just shut up and edit the audio, Scott. Let the guest stop talking.
But Anyways, aside from you rudely interrupting him, okay, I'm done. That was great stuff from Jake. It was good to hear again. I always like. I'm not like one of the people that need like that validation, but I like when Jake validates what I'm seeing on the film because, I didn't get to the all 22 yet. I was just watching the condensed version of the game playback on the before I came over here to record the podcast. It was good to hear that I'm seeing that he's seeing the same things as I am with Hyde, because there's a lot of people out there on Twitter, and again, I'm not going back to this, but it's just, I spend the majority of my time of social media on Twitter because I can't stand Facebook, but I have to have it, or else I would not have it. I would delete it if it wasn't for work purposes. But on Twitter, you just see people bashing Hyde over and over and over again, and I'm like, shit. I'm like, is there something I'm missing? Because that's one of the things I always, try to push myself to do. If I see a whole lot of people constantly saying the same thing, it's like, all right, I need to go back, I need to watch and see if I'm missing something here. But with Hyde, I didn't feel like I was missing it, so that's why I had to ask Jake.
Can I ask you a hypothetical question?
Yeah.
If you go to the gym 1 day a week, 2 days a week, do you think it might be possible to lift the heaviest weight you possibly can and to go balls to the wall and run your time on the treadmill as fast as you can, load up the barbell on the back squats, load up it for the bench press, and just really go kill it?
No.
We're 2 days a week. It might be easier to do that, right? Whereas on 5 days a week, what do you have left? You're going to have more in the tank because your body's going to be fresher. It's not going to be hurt when you're in the gym 2 or 3 days a week. When you're in the gym 5-6 days a week, at the end of that, your body might be broken down and you just might not have as much left in the tank at the end of those 5 days. At least I know that's how it is for me. If I go and I'm working out 2 or 3 days a week, in those 2 or 3 days a week, I can really go after it. You can take the intensity up because you're only going 2 or 3 days a week and your body has time to recover. When you're going 5 or 6 days a week, if you're going to increase quantity, then you decrease intensity. So what I'm saying on the football field is, when you're out there running the ball 20 times a game and you're second in the league in carries, it might cut into a little bit of your explosiveness and a little bit of your drive. Whereas when you're on the bench and you're not in 22 car crashes a game and you're in 3 or 2, you might just have fresher legs. You might just have more explosiveness. And some of the stuff you're seeing out of Nick Chubb, you might not be seeing right now if he was 147 carries in.
I was wondering where you were going with that. I thought we were going to do something like, hey, when you only go to the gym once or twice a week, you don't ever get to build up your strength. And I thought we were going to make fun of people who just read the box scores and say, oh, if you only show up and read the box scores and really pay attention to one rush per game, you're probably not going to understand. But no, that's cool.
I threw you a curveball.
I know. I was like, which way is he actually going to talk about football? No, all right.
Does the analogy make more sense?
It does. I'm good now. Like when you first asked me if you were going to be, my answer was no, because I was like, wait, which way are you going here? All right. But anyways, so big thank you to Jake for joining in, talking about Baker Mayfield, talking about Hyde, talking about the offensive line, and agreeing with everything I said. No, I'm just kidding. But let's stick with the game here, give about 5-10 more minutes thoughts on the defense, because we really didn't hit the defense, and it was my biggest fear going into this one, because all week long we kept seeing the same stat flashed everywhere. Phillip Rivers is the best quarterback in the NFL against the blitz. The Cleveland Browns have a defensive coordinator that all he does is blitz, blitz, blitz no matter what. And I made you make the comic book reference that I don't remember at this point in time, the immovable force and all that thing.
Yeah, the immovable object versus the irresistible force.
There you go. And basically, the blitzer was clashing with the guy who beats the blitz, and the guy who beats the blitz won all day long because Greg Williams' defense was gashed on everything. They were gashed on runs. They were gashed on passes. They were gashed on end-arounds to Keenan Allen. They were gashed on jump balls to the end zone with 3 Browns defenders and Tyrell frickin' Williams going up and pulling it out of Demarius Randall's hands. I mean, the Browns defense had no answer for anything 89.9% of the game. They did have a couple of nice rushes where they got home. They did have a couple of nice defensive plays where they made a good break on the ball. But overall, this was easily, in my opinion, a worse defensive performance than the Raiders game.
By far. There's at least excuses in the Raiders game. There was something like 87 possessions. And eventually you're going to get worn down. And when you give an NFL football team 87 possessions, they're going to score the football. It was a road game. It was a 4 o'clock start. I can give you a whole bunch of excuses that don't hold water, but I can give you excuses for that game. This was just terrible. Jamie Collins is one of your leading tacklers. Randall was your leading tackler, and anytime your free safety is your leading tackler, something has gone wrong. Your free safety shouldn't be your leading tackler. Am I right there, or is it one of those things where I'm just completely wrong? I think if your free safety is leading your team in tackling, that means everybody else failed to tackle the ball carrier first.
Remember DeQuell Jackson?
Yeah, making 147 tackles 9 yards downfield.
He basically played at the same spot the free safety was playing. So that should tell you there's a big problem.
There was nothing you can say. Look, if the guardian angel isn't stopping back-to-back post plays over the middle, I don't know what the guardian angel is stopping. Like, I really don't know what that defense is doing in that point if it's not stopping those two plays.
They literally ran. I went back and watched it because somebody on Twitter and in our forums on OBR said the same thing. I heard from somebody that they ran the same exact play back-to-back. Yes, they did. I mean, on the touchdown pass, Tyrell ran a little bit further on the post, but it was legitimately almost identical. I think maybe there was like one part of the alignment that was different. Rivers just went back up to the line, saw the same exact coverage that he saw on the previous play, and said, "We're gonna go it again, guys."
So when I used to play Madden football in leagues for money, I used to run the toss left play over and over and over again until someone could stop it. And then if they stopped it once, I'd just keep running it. And I would win like 80-14 every game because no one could stop it. And that's what I think Phillip Rivers just did there. He walked up the line. He goes, "Hey, let's run the post. Hey, they didn't stop it. Let's run the post." But even worse than that, like Phillip Rivers was 11 for 20. They didn't beat you throwing the ball around. I mean, they beat you on 2 plays throwing the ball around. Melvin Gordon just destroyed you. Mm-hmm. Keenan Allen on reverses just destroyed you. I mean, this defensive line that we talked about, it got annihilated. I don't know where Myles Garrett was. "Garrett, stop taking photos of nature. It's not going to help you sack the quarterback. Garrett, stop writing haikus. Roses are red, violets are blue. I'm putting my foot up your ass. Sack the quarterback."
I'll tell you what was really, really bad. And I apologized to him last week because he had a good game. Jamie Collins reverted to absolutely, utterly pathetic effort. I mean...
And he had 6 tackles. He was your second leading tackler, I think, or your third.
He was second, yeah. I just watched him do the same stuff, and he does it like twice every single game, where he takes the wrong side of the blocker and it absolutely leaves his guy open, the guy behind him open to just get not being in position over and over again. But that's, you know what? At least Collins was showing like 70% effort for the most part. This week, he was just, I mean, I was watching him not even run after plays after the guy blew by him or after he took the wrong pursuit angle. He was just like, I watched a defensive lineman, I forget who it was on one of the plays. I think it was Coley. Coley was blocked inside and came back and looped around and sprinted past Collins, who was basically walking back up the field after the play to the left. And Coley got back closer to the ball carrier than Collins did after taking the wrong pursuit angle. That's pathetic. Like, Collins was 4 yards up the field from Coley, and Coley or whoever it was got past him. It was just, I'm over the Jamie Collins experiment. Unfortunately, we don't have the linebacker depth, especially after losing Joe Schobert to a hamstring injury for, here we go again, Hugh Jackson, a few weeks. We'll see where he's at. But things are bad that as of Monday, the recording of this podcast, they're bringing in Navarro Bowman tomorrow for a workout on Tuesday. And Bowman's basically been out of football since he left the Raiders.
This thing's about to get ugly.
One more injury, it's going to be real bad.
Hollywood Higgins is probably not back next week.
No, he's not going to be back against Tampa. Lane was mentioning that they were going to keep him out of contact for a couple of weeks. I mean, the MCL sprain, I've always said, like, people are like, oh, he's week to week. It's 2 to 4 week healing. And for a guy like Higgins, who, you know, he really relies on that suddenness and crispness of being able to run routes. My prediction was it's going to take all 4 weeks.
I'm just going to go back and bring up a couple of things that people aren't going to like here. But this is why you don't trade Josh Gordon, because he went and did a private photo shoot. This is why you needed Dez Bryant, even though you guys think he's locker room cancer, because, I mean, Ratley is your third wide receiver right now.
He had a decent game, though.
But still, you need Dez Bryant right now.
You need it. Yeah, I mean,
Dez Bryant on this team looks real good right now. Josh Gordon on this team looks real good right now, and things don't look as bad as they are.
At least Dez, and I've been very anti bringing Dez just because of the locker room stuff, but at least Dez would force the defense to respect him, which would not allow them to roll 2 to 3 guys toward Jarvis on every play.
Correct. And right now, this is why when people said you don't need Dez Bryant, I said you're insane. Yes, you do. This is why when the Browns traded away Josh Gordon, I said you don't have the depth. You're not good enough to trade away Josh Gordon. And this is why when people said you don't trade a first-round draft pick and Emmanuel Ogbah for Khalil Mack, I said you're not good enough not to go get as much talent as you possibly can. The Browns had a chance to go add 2 more pieces that they needed, which would have created more depth, and they had a chance and they gave away Josh Gordon, who's not lighting the world on fire in New England, but he's still certainly better than anything we have on this roster aside from Landry right now.
I think it's coming there, by the way. He played like 80% of the snaps or something this week, and he had played like 10 or 15 and then 30. It's coming. There's going to be a big game.
The bottom line is that the Browns didn't have enough depth to act the way that they did, and you don't have enough depth to replace Joe Schobert. And I'm going to tell you something about Joe Schobert. Joe Schobert's an above-average guy in the NFL. I know he made the Pro Bowl last year, and people are going to tell me all this insane stuff. Joe Schobert is a guy who is supposed to be a starting middle linebacker on an average to not great team or depth on a good team. It's not that he's bad. It's not that he's a terrible player. But if you're talking to me that Joe Schobert is the answer at middle linebacker for the next 15 years, 10 years in Cleveland, I'm going to tell you that's a bad thing. Okay? Joe Schobert he's not even DeQuell Jackson. Peak DeQuell Jackson is probably better than Joe Schobert. And this is, sorry, you don't have the depth. And right now you're seeing that you don't have the depth. You're probably not going to have Treader at center, and that's probably an upgrade over what you're about to get next week. You don't have, just imagine what happens if you lose Hubbard. As bad as Hubbard's been, they don't have anybody to step out and replace him. As bad as Desmond Harrison has been, they don't have anybody else to go there.
Greg Robinson time.
You don't have any depth on this team, and this thing's about to get bad. And this is why I was pounding on the table saying, hell yes, you signed Dez Bryant. Hell yes, you trade for Khalil Mack. I'm not worried about 2 in the bush when I have a bird in the hand. And I had Khalil Mack in the hand. And I said no because of what Emmanuel Ogbah might be and what the draft pick is next year. Bottom line, you don't think that could have helped yesterday? You don't think that could have helped? You don't think that Dez Bryant and Josh Gordon could have helped yesterday? Created some room for Carlos Hyde to run because teams aren't sitting there going, this guy was playing the 4th quarter of the 4th preseason game, and he's lining up over there as their 3rd wide receiver. I'm not too concerned about him. Middle linebacker, go grab him. I mean, I'm exaggerating a bit there. But the point is the Browns don't have depth. And as much as I said good times are ahead, good times are ahead. The team is going in the right direction. You are a better team this year significantly than last year, and 6 or 7 wins, assuming there aren't more injuries, is possible. But this game against Tampa Bay, which I thought was probably a win, starts to look very tough to go get a win when these injuries are piling up, and you really start to look at where you are and what's sitting beneath the starting 22 players on this team.
So a couple things from in there. Starting with the linebackers. According to Jake, who we just had on, Jannard Avery is actually going to go fill in at the will, and Kirksey's going to bump down to the mic. So that's going to be something to watch. Jannard Avery's been very, very good as a pass rusher. I cannot speak. Off the edge, he's done very good things. He's been higher rated by PFF over Bradley Chubb. He's been very good. I'm interested to see how he is at the will. And then the other thing, going back to the Khalil Mack trade, I don't think it was that the Browns made a major offer. The Bears just swooped in and offered 2 firsts, and then we found out after the fact that the Raiders actually included a second going back there. But I think the Raiders, from everything that we heard, was that they saw 2 firsts and they didn't care what anybody else offered them. They took the 2 firsts and ran with it. So, but I'm right there with you on the defense. And one other thing I want to add on the defense before we get to the Tampa Bay game, because the Tampa Bay game could be what cures everything that ails this offense. The defense, I have never seen in my life a more undisciplined defense against the run ever. And Melvin Gordon and the Chargers offensive staff just took advantage of it. I mean, nobody was containing the edge. And I've been a huge Ogbah guy and talking about how great he is in run. Not one player on that defense was setting the edge. Not one player was maintaining any gap responsibilities. It was a field day.
Fly to the ball. Fly to the ball.
Greg Williams I'm just done saying it. I'm so over Greg Williams. I don't care if this defense ends up with 30 turnovers at the end of the year. It's great to create turnovers, but when you can't stop the every down plays, you can't stop Keenan Allen from gaining 40-something yards on end arounds.
Well, this is what happens when
atrocious.
Did the Browns create a turnover after I stopped watching it towards the end of the third
Kirksey had
quarter?
an interception.
Okay. And I am kind of intrigued to see Kirksey go back to the mic because I think he spent some time when they were in the 3-4 in a middle linebacker spot. And I actually didn't even think about the possibility. I should have. I'll blame the fog of the pain at this point. But putting Kirksey at the mic is pretty interesting. Avery to outside linebacker. Let's see what happens with it. I'm not going to say it can't work. If you know me, you know that I'm not a huge fan of converting a defensive end into an outside linebacker because the Browns always seem to think that's the solution to something. We have a guy who's playing well at defensive end. Let's make him an outside linebacker. And I've never understood that philosophy. I get it. Other people do it. Other teams do it. But it's not a terrible idea. I mean, at this point, how much worse than, Jamie Collins is still going to be playing, but can you be worse than Jamie Collins?
Oh, I mean, Avery played a ton of linebacker at Memphis, though. Like, he moved around in that defense. I'm not at all concerned about Avery. I'm just interested to see him specifically taking essentially Schobert's role in the defense with that move to Will. But is that where Schobert was playing the Will?
Schobert was playing the middle linebacker.
Oh, okay. So I'm interested to
I think Kirksey was playing the Will, and that means that you had to move. You moved Avery there because you moved Kirksey to play the middle linebacker spot.
That's right. Okay, yeah. Duh. I had everything backed up. But yeah, so I'm not really overly concerned about Avery making the move. I'm just intrigued to see what they're going to do behind him. Because if he's moving there, then you're probably going to have to see, I don't know, maybe more Chris Smith rushing the quarterback, because they were bringing Avery on a lot of pass rushes. So I wonder if you're going to see more Chris Smith on the field to rush the passer or what they're going to do there. I don't know, but switching gears.
You are right, though. It probably is one more injury anywhere before this thing gets really ugly. Maybe they can weather Treader with Corbett because Treader hasn't been that great. But I don't know how many more injuries. I don't know how much more worse it can get on offense. You had Antonio Callaway who now has 13 receptions as the second most experienced wide receiver. You did add someone this week, so it might not be the same thing. But
Brashad Perriman,
right?
No,
he's just bad.
Just no.
You've got Jarvis Landry, as I said before, and a rookie who doesn't have a lot of effort right now. Has effort issues, and a bunch of guys.
So let's turn the page. Browns lost 2-3-1. Sadness, doom, gloom. Tampa Bay time. Heading down to Tampa Bay, who just fired their defensive coordinator today. Just lost to the Atlanta Falcons, the 1-4 Atlanta Falcons. Got Jameis Winston, crab leg loving Jameis Winston, back as their quarterback. Their secondary is atrocious. Atrocious is my word of the day today. The other day it was shit. Or the other podcast, it was shit. Atrocious doesn't describe properly how bad the Tampa Bay secondary is. Honestly, Scott, if the Browns receivers, I don't care who's out there. I don't care if they sign 2 guys off of practice squads this week and have to run them out there. If the Browns receivers cannot torch this Tampa Bay secondary on Sunday, it might be time to fire Hugh Jackson. It might be time to fire many members of this staff. I mean, they're not going to fire all of them, but it might be time to start considering, like, the Browns go down to Tampa and put up a clunker this week, heading into Pittsburgh week. This is the game that remedies all that just went wrong for your offense against San Diego, Los Angeles Chargers. They're just bad. Like, they just get torched by everybody.
At what point as a fan, for the long-term success of the Browns, do you start rooting for enough losses in the next few weeks for Hugh Jackson to get fired? Is it if they lose today? Because this week, if they win Sunday, theoretically you can keep the P word in your vocabulary.
At 3-3-1, yeah.
But if they lose at 2-4-1, you're done. You're effectively done unless you're going to do something absolutely amazing. Because I'll go back to the 2002 season. The Browns were 2-4 at the bye week, and they came back and went 9-7. Because they ended up going 7-3 after that bye week. I don't see a 7-3 run so much with this schedule out there. Well, you can't do a 7-3 run now anyway, but I don't see them, if they don't get a win this week, I don't know where you're getting them all. So at what point do you just start rooting for the Browns? I think it might be if you lose this week. If you lose this week with what's coming ahead, you just root for the Browns to keep losing. So maybe it gets to 2-7-1 and Hugh Jackson doesn't survive the year. Because I'm about done with Hugh. If you can't figure out to kick the field goal at 21-6, to kick the damn field goal, it was 14-3. If you can't figure out a 14-3 to kick the field goal and get that thing to within one score, what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to root openly for them to lose just to get Hugh fired. But I get what you're saying. And I got people on Twitter, like when I was joking around about future Browns head coach Dave Taub, guys, like, can we just start referring to Hugh Jackson in the past tense just to get it done and over with? But Tampa Bay. So I just looked it up because I knew it was bad. 439.8 yards given up per game. Second to last in the NFL. All right. Opportunity is going to be there for Baker Mayfield and the Cleveland Browns. I mean, just rolling through to it now. They are dead last in the NFL at 355.6 yards per game passing, given up. This is the opportunity for Baker Mayfield to learn from last week's mistakes, hopefully for the offensive line to, do their damn job, and for receivers to get open. Because if I'm not mistaken, I believe Tampa Bay is missing one or two guys from their secondary, and the people filling in are just, it's not great. I was going to say atrocious again, but it's just not great. I mean, Julio torched them. Everybody, pretty much every team, every receiver that's faced Tampa Bay has torched.
I think I saw Brent Grimes on their roster at cornerback, and I think he was starting to get old like 4 years ago when the Browns considered signing him.
That would have been fun with his wife here. Miko, she's a special brand of crazy.
Oh, yeah. Would have been interesting what would have happened here. She got him in some trouble, too, with the Dolphins, I think.
Oh, yeah. She was on social media, like, ripping people apart.
Yep.
But, yeah, so looking at their roster right now, they've got Ryan Smith starting at one corner and Brent Grimes starting at the other, which means that Vernon Hargreaves, who was I believe, first or second round pick a few years ago from Florida, he's on the IR. He's out. Looks like looking through it a little bit more, they've got a couple of members of their secondary. Chris Conti's on the IR. He's one of their starting, or he used to be one of their starting safeties. So they are super beat up in the back end of that defense. And, you're going to have to deal with Gerald McCoy at the point of attack. You're going to have to deal with Jason Pierre-Paul at the point of attack. And that's going to be scary. Pierre-Paul lining up across from Harrison with him getting absolutely destroyed. But if the Browns can find a way, if they can find a damn way to block somebody, give Baker Mayfield a little bit of time and get some receivers to gain some separation from these scrubs in the secondary, this is a big bounce back opportunity for the Browns. And like Jake mentioned, their next few games are all big opportunities because they're facing Tampa Bay this week. Then they go to the Steelers, finish up the season series against the Steelers. And then they host the Chiefs and the Falcons in back-to-back weeks, who are also right there with Tampa Bay at the bottom of the league in total yards given up per game. Now, Kansas City is undefeated because their offense is ridiculous, but we don't need to get into that right now. We'll get into that when it comes time. But going back to Tampa Bay, they're just getting throttled by everybody when it comes to giving up yards. This is an opportunity. And I think what they need to do early and often is just, as bad as this sounds, I think you need to take a shot to Callaway right off the rip. Just see what's back there. And then after that, you're going to try and force feed Jarvis. But if they do not have Duke Johnson split out wide for 65% of the snaps of this game, somebody should be fired. Regardless of the outcome, somebody should be fired. Because he already proved throughout the Chargers game as your most effective receiver that was on the field.
Duke Johnson is your second best wide receiver currently healthy on this roster. He might be your second best wide receiver, period, on the roster. No disrespect to Hollywood Higgins, who's having a good year. It is about time, if you were ever going to do the Duke Johnson conversion to a wide receiver, Eric Metcalf 2.0, now is the time. Because, look, the writing's on the wall a bit for Duke as a running back anyway, because those carries that he's getting now, and he's not getting a lot, are going to go to Nick Chubb in time. In time, it's going to be Carlos Hyde and Nick Chubb. It's not going to be Nick Chubb and Duke Johnson is my guess, although it could be. it is time with the decimated wide receiving core. You know, you're bringing in Brent Perriman. Instead of that, how about you let Duke Johnson be your third wide receiver right now? Antonio Callaway is the 2. Let's get Duke some looks at wide receiver. He knows the routes. He can catch the football, and he's more athletic and got a better chance of separating, making plays than anybody else active on this roster at the moment, aside from Callaway and Landry. This is a no-brainer. If he isn't, as you said, playing the majority of his snaps as your third wide receiver, if anyone else, he should just be listed as your third wide receiver for Sunday. Period. Duke isn't playing running back right now. His role can go to Nick Chubb. Duke is now your third wide receiver until Hollywood Higgins is healthy. That's it. And when Hollywood Higgins is healthy, he's your fourth wide receiver / third running back. I know some may be saying this is a fan talking, but this is not that hard to do. Duke Johnson has seen enough routes as a wide receiver to be able to go in and run those routes.
It's not just a fan talking at all. Eric Metcalf, former Cleveland Brown, is out there tweeting the same things that you're saying right now. And no, you're not reading from his, and no folks out there listening, he's not reading from Eric Metcalf's Twitter. So it's not just fans noticing this. It's former players noticing this. It's coaches. It's people on the broadcast noticing the same thing over and over again. Duke Johnson needs more snaps at receiver. Switching over to the Tampa Bay offense real quick, though. This is what scares me, is they have the second, they're averaging the second most yards per game, and it's all coming from the pass. Like, they're so bad at running the ball, it's not even funny. They're rushing the ball.
I bet they run the ball well Sunday.
They're rushing the ball 80 yards per game.
I bet they hit 100 Sunday.
They're throwing it 368.4 yards per game. Like, they're number 2 in the league in total yards per game, and they're getting 80 of that from their run. Peyton Barber, not good. Rookie draft pick Ronald Jones out of USC, who many people wanted, was in the conversation for the Browns, he can't sniff the field. They drafted a guy to be their pass catching back who didn't catch passes in college. He cannot find the field right now. So this game has all of the makings of, hey, Greg, what you should do is try and slow down the pass and make them beat you with the run. Okay. Let's see what happens there, Greg, because you know what he's going to do? He's just going to keep blitzing.
I found Greg Williams' script for the first few plays. Engage 8, red dog blitz, engage 8, red dog blitz, engage 8, bullets blitz, engage 8, corner blitz, engage 8, red dog blitz, engage 8, silver strike. Those are all my favorite Madden plays.
Oh, the silver strike.
But they're not going to... You're seeing the little play calls in your head, too, as I'm reading them off.
Right now, coming off the...
Yep.
2 safeties coming off the edge is the silver strike, right? Both of them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. But yeah, so going back to this, I mean, you're talking about a Tampa Bay offense, now with Jameis Winston back at the helm, Mike Evans, Deshaun Jackson, Chris Godwin, Humphreys, and then we get to the tight ends. Cameron Brate, O.J. Howard. I'm scared. I wasn't as scared for the Chargers game as I am right now for Greg Williams' defense going up against Tampa Bay's passing attack.
If the Browns could have stopped Melvin Gordon, they'd have been fine against the Chargers.
Yeah.
They'd have been fine. It was Melvin Gordon that beat them. They ran 2 post plays. Aside from that, Phillip Rivers was 11 for 20. And you may say he didn't have to pass the ball much and he would have figured it out anyway. They couldn't stop Melvin Gordon. And look, this is where my problem is. I'm just going to get to it. Tampa Bay is going to win this game. If the Browns were healthy, I'd take the Browns here. Which means since every time I pick the Browns to lose, they win. Hooray, Cleveland. But Tampa Bay is going to win this game because it's too much offense. You have a team that is, at this point, it's almost fair to say you're almost decimated by injury. I mean, your wide receiving core has been decimated by injury and John Dorsey's hubris. You're down to Jarvis Landry and a bunch of guys. Your middle linebacker's out. You're switching your outside linebacker to middle linebacker. You're taking your defensive end to outside linebacker. Jamie Collins is out there not giving a damn at the other outside linebacker. And, EJ Gaines is EJ Gainesing. You want to put some, TJ Carey's your other option. Brian Body Calhoun somehow can't sniff the field anymore. And I don't understand, how he's not considered in the rotation a little more.
$8 million. That's why.
But
as sad as I hate to say it, but TJ Carey's getting $8 million this year. That's why he's out there.
And he shouldn't be. I mean, he's just EJ Gaines, at least at times, has done stuff. It's a problem. If the Browns were healthy and you didn't have a team decimated by injury, then I think you'd have a good chance in this game. But you have a Tampa Bay team that is throwing the ball at will when they can't run the ball, and they're getting every team's oasis in the desert when you're struggling to run the football since 1999, the Cleveland Football Browns. And they should be able to run the ball, which should make the passing more effective. And I'm sure Todd Haley also has some double reverse flea flicker passes over the middle to Baker Mayfield in the book this week, because he didn't have anything crazy aside from a flea flicker last week. I know my optimism is gone, but if the Browns were healthy, they win this game. And the fact of the matter is, I don't think there's enough depth on this team to overcome these injuries. That said, I guess I'll hold to my fan mantra of how do they win as a fan? Baker Mayfield changes everything. And if he can win a game this week with this wide receiving core, because it's probably going to have to be a shootout, more power. I mean, then he is the next iteration of Brett Favre.
So, since you're already on it, what's your prediction?
42 to... Nah, I can't go with that. This defense hasn't been roasted like that before. Except for, they gave up 42 and they to Oakland, but mostly this defense done well. 33-21.
Losing 33-21.
We're losing 33-21.
All right. So I look over at Tampa Bay's schedule, and I see they beat New Orleans, they beat Philadelphia, then they lost at home against the Steelers, lost on the road against Chicago, lost on the road against Atlanta, which they had a chance to win there at the end if Deshaun Jackson would just, fielded that ball cleanly. And then now they're coming home for the Browns before hitting the road again for the Bengals and the Panthers. So Tampa Bay, they have to get up for this game, because hitting the road for Cincinnati and the Panthers, if they lose this game to the Browns and fall to 2-4, they could be coming home. They could be coming home in Week 10 at 2-6, or because they have a bye in there, maybe. Oh, they already had a bye. Yeah, so they could be coming home in Week 10 at 2-6. This is a big game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and I know you took them to win. I look at this game and I see the Browns beat up just like you do, but I can't get past the fact of how bad that Tampa Bay secondary is, just how awful it is. But at the same side, I can't get past the fact of how bad our offensive line is. And I think Jason Pierre-Paul and Gerald McCoy are going to have a field day up front if our line performs like they did against the Chargers.
I'm glad you brought that up because I forgot to say it.
Yeah. They're going to have a field day, an utter field day up front if our line blocks like they did against the Chargers. And Baker Mayfield could be on his back quite often. With that said, I am going to pick the Browns in this one. And that's not the fan in me doing it. It's because I've seen how bad Tampa Bay's secondary is, and also something that Jake alluded to when we had him on, where he said this was the worst game he's seen Baker Mayfield play as a quarterback, dating all the way back to Ohio State in 2016. To me, Baker Mayfield isn't the type of guy who's going to have back-to-back bad performances. So what I think you're going to see is a pissed-off, fiery Baker Mayfield come out this week against Tampa Bay and light him up. So I'm going to go with not going over the 30s, even though I feel like I probably should. But I'm going to say the Browns win this one 28-20. I think you're going to see maybe a little bit of rejuvenated Greg Williams defense out there and see them kind of, capitalize on a few things. Jameis Winston does have the affinity to throw the interception, and so the Browns could get back on there, forcing multiple turnovers in a game way. So hopefully Jameis eating W's on his hand is out there throwing interceptions and giving away goodness to the Browns.
I'll go with that. I like it. Like it better than my prediction.
Well, you're going to like it better, but I feel like, I don't know, it could go either way. So with that said, we've talked at length about the Chargers game. We've talked about Tampa. Let's dive in to some OBR subscriber questions now, because they have some really good ones. And unfortunately, I know everybody, you come for Lane. He did have some personal things. He did let us know while we were recording, so he actually could not join us this week. But don't worry, he will be back for next week's episode. So let's dive into the OBR Straight Talk. Episode 8 questions from the forums. Our first one comes from Wallace Matthew. It's frustrating watching how undisciplined this team is. My question is, how would you rate the assistant coaches? Are there any that would be considered top 10 in the league at their respective position? At this point in time, I can't think of one assistant coach that would be rated at top 10 at his respective position. I mean, Haley would probably be the closest to being rated up there, but I mean, he's been pretty bad at play calling at the beginning of this year, but when he was clicking on all cylinders with the Steelers, he was definitely up there.
If you look at Todd Haley's offenses in the Steelers, I think there was only 1 year that he wasn't top 4, and he was like 8th, I want to say, that year. But then again, how hard is it to call a successful offense when you have Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown? I mean, come on. And Le'Veon Bell. How hard is it? It's not easy. You can misuse that talent, but you had one of the greatest quarterbacks of a generation, one of the greatest wide receivers of a generation, and some people would say the best running back in the game when he's healthy. So I would hope that you come highly rated as an offensive coordinator. I'd agree with you. Todd Haley, maybe. Greg Williams, I don't think is a top 10 defensive coordinator. I don't think he has been a top 10 defensive coordinator for a long time, but he does have a Super Bowl ring. But he's probably also not allowed to tell the other team to intentionally punch the knee and the ankle of the other team's quarterback in the bottom of the pile anymore.
Aside from them, I mean, I know Freddie Kitchens, the running backs coach, he comes really highly regarded around the league. Is he a top 10 running backs coach? I don't know. I don't go that far in my rankings to find out who the top running backs coaches in the league are. But I mean, he got an associate head coach title out of this as well, and he was calling plays for Haley in the last preseason game as a future offensive coordinator. So maybe Kitchens, but I don't know if there's anybody that would be like, if you took a poll around the league right now, I don't think anybody would say, yep, that guy's top 10.
I just got to add, it's hard for me to harshly judge the assistant coaches on this team right now, because this has been my mantra, and I'm trying to maintain some objectivity here. I know no one wants to hear you say this, but you're talking about a team that's 1-31 and 4-44 in the last 3 complete seasons. I know there's 40 new players on this team, but just because you turned over most of the roster doesn't mean you turned it over with a bunch of guys that are really good players yet. And so when you're looking at a team that was torn down to the studs and you're in the process of trying to add some good NFL talent to it, you got to look at where your depth is, and you got to ask, look, just think about it in your own job. If you're a manager, if you're in charge of a team, you're as good as your team is. And ultimately, there's only the best manager in the world, the best coach in the world can only do so much with the talent that they're given. And I think the harsh reality is you got to take a look at the Browns. And while there's players at certain spots, when you get much beneath those top 22, it starts to get a little thin. So that's what I'd add when you're trying to judge the assistant coaches. You say, oh, coaches got to make these players better. Yeah, you're at the NFL, though. At some point, the talent's going to separate, and there's only so much coaching can do. Antonio Brown's Antonio Brown. He's not Antonio Brown because he had a good wide receivers coach. In the end, he's Antonio Brown. No one's going to take Greg Little and make him Antonio Brown. It's not happening.
Second question comes from Ram, who's very long-winded at times, but let me try to get through this.
Hey, man after my own heart.
Yes. Were the Oakland and LA Chargers games just bad games? Were they part of the team just transitioning from a bad team to a good team? The offensive team and defensive team, as well as the special teams, have so many new parts. The benefit of continuity and consistency is missing. Is it realistic to believe that there will be a certain level of consistency and continuity from this group that has been so recently gathered? And then he goes in to talk about how Dorsey talked about a 3-year plan, some additions for the long term, like all teams. And the success of free agent additions and draft picks is never 100%. So, as weird as it sounds, the Chargers game, like I said earlier, as when I went back and watched it, the first half wasn't as bad as I thought it was. But yeah, I mean, you can say that they're just outlier games, that they're bad games. But when you have a team that, as Scott mentioned, has 40 new players and is very, very young, you're going to have good games. You're going to have bad games. I mean, that's the NFL. I know that's super cliche to say, but when you have a lot of young guys who are still undisciplined, who aren't veterans, and then you're mixing in veterans with bad tendencies, like a guy like Jamie Collins, who's leaving his, players behind him open up. And then you're talking about an offensive line that your 3 veterans in the middle are underperforming big time. Your veteran that you signed is underperforming big time at right tackle, and you're starting a freaking undrafted, free agent at left tackle. So I think that, while they're bad games, I think that this, that's going to happen throughout the season because it's a lot of young guys, a lot of guys that haven't played together, just like you said, Ram, in your question. So I think you're going to hopefully develop consistency over time, but the reality of the entire thing is, and it goes back to what Scott has said almost on every podcast, is that this team is not as deep as everybody thinks they are. Just because you drafted a guy like Antonio Callaway, who people said had first-round talent and would have been a first-rounder if it wasn't for his off-the-field issues. No, you got a 4th-round receiver who hadn't played football in a year.
Who, at the moment, looks like a 6th-round receiver.
Right. You have an offensive line that, with J.C. Treader going down and possibly being out for the Tampa Bay game, is now going to have to shove Austin Corbett into their center role, and he couldn't play left tackle. He couldn't play left guard. So now we're going to put him at center, and he hasn't played there. So again, we're looking at a team where you're seeing those depth issues that Scott harped on through every podcast and on other shows before we started the podcast. Scott's harped on these issues because over the past couple of years, you've moved in and out so many pieces with old regime, new regime, moved out guys, brought in new guys, depth signings, but not top tier players. And now you're going to see that come to the forefront. So the hope here is that obviously the Browns can get healthy, but I don't know how quickly they can get healthy, because I think getting healthy and getting your normal players out there playing regular snaps is going to be the key to getting more consistency, because getting guys like Hollywood Higgins back provides, Baker Mayfield somebody that he trusts, which means that, Jarvis will scheme open a little bit. Callaway flips back into a role, maybe getting against the lesser defensive back, so on and so forth. So I think that to answer your question, I think it's going to be a continuity thing, but I also think, as Scott alluded to, and he'll talk about in a second, we need to get some more damn good players in here. And it's not going to be now. It's going to be next year. And this year is going to be a growing process of becoming an above average team. And then maybe next year we can get to becoming a good team.
The Browns are on their way to no longer being a bad football team, but they're not there yet. The sad truth is that the Oakland Raiders game and the San Diego Chargers game is probably closer to what this team is right now than the New York Jets game. Because, hey, the Jets are not the laughingstock New York Jets anymore, but they're not a great team yet either. And it was a Thursday night game and they weren't ready for Baker Mayfield. The Pittsburgh Steelers, that was week 1 in the NFL. Funny things happen in week 1 in the NFL. Personally, I think that the Oakland Raiders game is probably closest to what this team is. They're probably closer to that team than they are the San Diego Chargers team. They should never get boat raced out of a game. But then again, that's if this team is even 90% healthy. You have critical injuries right now. You absolutely have critical injuries, and it's hurting you in key spots. And you're starting an undrafted free agent at left tackle. Stop and think. How many teams are starting an undrafted free agent at left tackle?
If there is one, he's proved it, and he's not a rookie now. Like, he's a former undrafted free agent who's developed into a starter over a few years. But no, I don't.
How many teams are starting a rookie undrafted free agent at left tackle, and they also are now about to start a rookie at center who lost his hand-given starting job at 2 other positions on the line?
None.
So how many other teams right now, when they get an injury to their Mike linebacker, then get an injury to their first string Mike linebacker, are moving their Will linebacker over and then replacing that guy with a backup defensive end?
When you put it like that, I might have to go back and amend my prediction.
How many teams are at this point? How many teams right now, for their backup free safety is last year's second corner? You don't have a backup free safety. I guess you have Kindred. Is Kindred your backup free safety?
Probably Peppers, actually.
But
and Kindred would slide back over in a strong.
In effect, Brian Body Calhoun is your backup free safety.
Yeah.
He's a cornerback.
On the depth chart, he is. Yep.
He's a cornerback.
So to answer your question, Ram,
they're just closer to being the team that played against the Oakland Raiders right now, in my mind.
Yeah, and it's going to take time. I mean, you're going to even see some of the players on this roster. I mean, you're going to see a bunch of these players on this roster either cut or moved out, not re-signed next year. And you're going to continue to have to draft more players, get them in the door. And you're going to have to, hit on some guys in free agency or via trades. I mean, it's just going to happen. It's going to happen. I mean, you need to get And the league isn't deep on every single position, but you need some more depth. I mean, you need some more good. No, not even just depth. You need some more good players.
You're just thin at a lot of places. Let me add another one. Your second best wide receiver is your third down running back.
Yeah. All right. Heading to our final subscriber question, but he hooked us up with 3 of them, is Sam Gold, who enjoys long walks on the beach and correcting me on Twitter. So thank you, Sam. Number 1, why do they refuse to scheme the talent they do have, Johnson, Njoku, Devolve, Chubb, into bigger roles in the offense? So I'm going to start with Devolve. I think Seth Devolve, with the injuries, has basically played himself into a position where he might be behind the 8 ball in terms of offensive knowledge and knowledge of Todd Haley's playbook. And also, every single damn week, Seth Devolve is on the injury report, limited in practice. So you have a guy who basically missed all of preseason, all of training camp. Then he came back, was out again, came back, had that catch against the the last home game that they won. Shit. Why am I an idiot right now? The Ravens. Had that catch from the goal line where he aligned left and came off the edge and had a real nice 20-yard gain or something like that on that play. So I really just think with Devolve, I think it's just availability. I mean, availability is the number one thing you need right now, and he's just been limited, and they probably just don't trust him right now. Chubb, we've all heard my take on Chubb for weeks now. I think it's criminal that he's only getting 3 carries a game, but I also understand why when I watch the film deeper. Everybody's going to again point to the box score from this week and say, look at that. He had 20-something yards rushing on 3 carries, but one of them was, as Jake mentioned, it was one of those stretch plays where he was kind of dead to rights in the backfield and made things happen on his own. And while it's great, and just like on that second touchdown running as the Raiders, while it's great to see a guy make things happen and make multiple people miss after being dead to rights in the backfield, those plays aren't always going to happen. And there's a reason why Nick Chubb has kind of run himself into those situations sometimes where he tries to bounce it outside instead of taking the gimme yards in the middle that everybody rips Hyde for. He doesn't do that. And also he struggled in pass pro. Yes, I understand Hyde struggled last week in pass pro. But overall, the reason Chubb's not seeing the field are the reasons that we've talked about. Duke, do you want to take Duke? Why we haven't seen more scheming for Duke? I mean, you've been very adamant.
So, to me, it just look. You do need to see more scheming for Duke Johnson at this point. But I'm going to start this question off, pulling off an old chestnut that I used to have back in the day, when people used to ask me why we aren't getting Josh Cribbs more involved in the offense, and I would always go to the answer to that question and say, if you're figuring out how to get your special team superstar more involved in the offense, you don't have an offense and you have bigger problems. Successful teams don't need to figure out how to get their punt return specialist the ball in offense, whether it's in a reverse or a wildcat formation or as the slot wide receiver. I also feel that if you're trying to figure out how to get your second string tight end, your second string running back, and your third down specialist more involved in the offense as a solution to the problems on your offense, you're foobarred far more than you think. Because ultimately, if your first and second and third string wide receiver and your first string tight end and your running back aren't making plays for you, well, now you're just hoping to survive on a bunch of gimmicks. And you're trying to scheme, and by scheme, trick the defense into letting that guy get open. And in the NFL, you have to be able to line up and move the other team's defensive line off of their spot and run the football. You have to line up and know that your guy at wide receiver can win a one-on-one battle like Antonio Brown can and go catch a pass. And we're at a point now where we're looking at saying, other than Jarvis Landry, I don't know who can win a one-on-one battle and go catch a pass. And Jarvis Landry isn't facing one-on-one battles anymore. And the offensive line can't move someone off their spot. So I'm not sure, because we complain when Todd Haley does a double reverse to someone from the 10-yard line. But that's what scheming this talent into the play is. So we can either sit here and try to figure out how to make plays with the guys who are supposed to be making plays and run an offense, or Todd Haley can go mix 25 plays in to try to figure out how to. And I get what you're saying. Let's get Chubb some more carries. Let's get Seth DeValve some more looks on the field. But do you want to take David Njoku off for Seth DeValve? Because ultimately, if we're trying to win a game right now, I said last week, Seth DeValve probably gives you the better chance to do it because he's going to catch the damn ball more often. But ultimately, if David Njoku catches the ball, there's nothing Seth DeValve does better running routes and being a dynamic playmaker than David Njoku. He just doesn't. You line the two up together, and it's David Njoku all day. So since you're not really concerned about winning games, but figuring out if David Njoku is an NFL tight end, you're not going to take his reps away for Seth DeValve. Chubb, we talked about it ad nauseum, I agree. And Duke Johnson, to me, it just comes down to up until the last couple of weeks, where was the spot for Duke Johnson? When you had Jarvis Landry, Josh Gordon, and Hollywood Higgins, and they were all healthy, and potentially Des Bryant, well, there's not some balls for Duke Johnson to catch as a wide receiver. You're just not taking Josh Gordon off the field for Duke Johnson. And you probably at this point shouldn't be taking Hollywood Higgins off the field as a wide receiver for Duke Johnson. And you weren't getting rid of Antonio Callaway because Duke Johnson isn't going to run the routes Antonio Callaway is supposed to run better. Same thing I said as a running back, it's durability. Duke Johnson isn't durable enough to go be a 15 carry a game running back. And if he's just coming in as a pass catcher out of the backfield, well, then you're tipping your hand to the offense as to what you're doing, and it's not a run. Ultimately, yeah, you should probably be using Duke Johnson more than you are, especially now. So that one I'll agree with you on. And that's an extremely long-winded answer to a question. But ultimately, it comes down to the same thing. It's the Josh Cribbs thing. If you're figuring out how to get your specialist players more involved on the offense and you have to scheme them into play and trick them into play to be successful, you're foobarred.
Second question from Sam. I'm going to let you do this one. Hopefully not as long-winded.
I'm trying to get us that hour and 40 minute. I mean, we're getting close. I didn't think we were going to get there.
Oh, my gosh. All right. I know you love a good conspiracy. Is Todd Haley being unduly pressured by Hugh front office ownership to run an offensive scheme more in line with Hugh's philosophy rather than his own? I always thought Haley was more effective at utilizing the talent he did have than he appears to be here.
No, Todd Haley doesn't have the talent here that he had in Pittsburgh. And if you stack those things together, one of those things does not look like the other and the scales don't balance. Todd Haley, at times, we've criticized him for trying to run an offense that works if Big Ben is your quarterback. And the bottom line is he doesn't have Le'Veon Bell. He doesn't have Antonio Brown. He doesn't have Juju Smith-Schuster even. And he doesn't have Ben Roethlisberger. And he doesn't have that offensive line. He's not trying to run Hugh Jackson's scheme. Just going to say this over and over again. You have a talent problem in Cleveland as much as fans don't want to believe you have a talent problem.
And the final question, if the performance of our defense through 22 games of Greg Williams' scheming/coaching is similar to his other stops, why does he continue to get work? So the NFL is a good old boys club. It's not as bad as baseball, where you see the same exact manager hired like 6 times, but it's always going to be a good old boys club where people, Hugh Jackson is respected around the league and everybody wants to coach with him and people want to play for him. Performance and production be damned. Greg Williams, same thing. He had some good defenses back in the day. I believe he won a Super Bowl, right?
He won. That's where I was going to go with it.
He won a Super Bowl. So honestly, Sam, like the best reason that I can give you is the good old boys club, and he just that's just how the league is. They continue to get chances over and over and over again until they are either too old to do it or finally they just do something so stupid that they're unhireable at that as a defensive coordinator, and he'd still probably end up getting a defensive assistant or consultant job somewhere.
It's the American workplace. It's the Peter principle. You get promoted until you fail. And then you end up settling back down in the position that you proved you could do well. Ken Wisenhunt is a coordinator right now. Norv Turner is a coordinator over and over and over again. And anyone who needs an offensive coordinator, Norv Turner's on that short list. Greg Williams is on. I don't know if Greg Williams, I don't think he's ever been a head coach. So
yeah,
he has. So it's the Peter principle. You get promoted until you fail, and then you go back down to what you've shown that you can do at a moderate level of competence. Greg Williams has got a Super Bowl ring on his hand. And what that tells you is that with the right talent around him, Greg Williams can coach a defense well enough to win you a Super Bowl.
Damn it, I messed up. He was head coach with the Bills.
Okay. Wow. That's not even fair. If there's a franchise as bad as the Browns, they're not as bad, but they're the only one in the running over the last 15 years. Romeo Crennel is still a defensive coordinator somewhere. And you got to ask what Romeo has done anywhere to still be, on an NFL head coach. But in the end, it's the same thing at your workplace. I mean, you've seen people who it's just that simple. You get promoted until you fail, And then people will hire you back into the last job you did successfully before you fail. And then a lot of times don't even ask why you left your last company. You've done this job before? Okay, we don't have to train you how to do it. Come on in and do it. Someone else lets you do it. You're obviously qualified to do it. And I got to say one more thing about Greg Williams. He's not that bad of a defensive coordinator. He's never going to go in and who was Mike Pettine's buddy? That was the defensive coordinator. I can't even remember his name, but he was so maligned when we were at No Static Radio. Mike Pettine's buddy, who
Jim
was
O'Neill.
the defense, Jim O'Neill. He's not Jim O'Neill. He's never going to be Jim O'Neill bad. His defense is, he's never going to have the 31st ranked defense in the league. Is he? Greg Williams' defense is probably going to be somewhere in the middle of the pack. And it might pop and have a good year and be top 10. But with the Greg Williams defense, look, you can say what you want about the Browns. The Browns didn't go 0-16 last year because of the defense. The Browns aren't 2-3-1 this year because of the defense. You can argue that in the Oakland Raider game, they should have won it, and last week was bad. But I mean, ultimately, a Greg Williams defense is going to be okay. And that's why he keeps getting jobs, because you know it's going to be okay.
Well, on that note, Scott, we went way longer than we thought we were going to go tonight when we had that nice, stellar, and shortened to the point opening about the Browns offense before we talked to Jake. So
could have been my 20-minute answers to each of the listener questions.
Possibly. Well, on that note, thank you as always to everybody for listening. Thank you to Jake Burns from the OBR for joining us to break down some Baker, some offensive line, and give a little love out there to Carlos Hyde, even though so many aren't giving him the love. Scott, for us, I hope that next week when we record this podcast, we're talking about a win and not your prediction coming true.
So do I, because I felt the negativity creeping in, and another loss, I may be into full-blown negative Scott mode that you're more familiar with.
You're going to be miserable for Pittsburgh Steelers week. So on that note, everybody out there, thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, follow us on Twitter at the OBR. Subscribe to the OBR because there's a whole lot of great content there going on. Until next time, go Browns.
Dumbass. Just shut up and edit the audio, Scott.